Hello, okay, I've recorded this video a couple times now, and then I keep spotting small mistakes or things that I could do better. Hopefully this is the last one. Anyway, so, more interesting bass sound design that is not just like a noise bass, like these. I like doing growl stuff sometimes, and I like doing weird growl stuff, not just like, I don't know, like Volcano into 3 OTTs with a corpus growl sound design. It sounds like this. Or with like the actual thing we're working on. High passed because I'm destroying the low end and it looks really DC offsetted and disgusting, and because it just makes more sense for me to use a dedicated sub. Obviously they have the same like pitch movements, so the same glide time on both. Yeah, anyway, so from the bottom, effectively what's going on here is I just have like a standard operator growl. I'm trying to turn it up so you can hear it, and I'm going to use the master because I'm using this autofilter with an envelope, which is possibly stupid, but this means that if I were to turn this up so you could hear it better, it would actually push this up the spectrum, which would like destroy the sound. But yeah, so basically just simple stuff. I've got a sine wave, I'm FMing it with a more complicated waveform, and I'm just sort of drawing in harmonics arbitrarily so that I've got content to form it like shape later down the line. So it wouldn't make sense for me to start with like a sine wave or something, and then, well, I mean, I guess you could, but like start with a sine wave, something simple, and then distort it, because then you wouldn't have that much interesting mid-range business. And I'm sort of carving out room here so that I've got like peaks of interesting positions, like formants that I can work with. You could go the other way with this as well. You could start with something that looks a little bit like freakier and then FM it with something simple. It's like Bro Step Sound Design 101. You start with something simple and then FM it with something complicated. You don't like FM too complicated waves, because then it just turns into noise. That's also why I've got this tone on 55%, because I probably overdid it a little bit. I'm using these two just to like add some more mid-range harmonics. Turn them off, it probably won't sound that much different. That actually sounds better. Oh well. But yeah, and I'm just doing it like this because I like it to sound a little bit odd and not like a super standard growl. If I wanted to make it sound a little bit more normal, I could probably do something like this, no, like that, like this, which is kind of stupid because I'm pretty sure if I flatten it out, it'll just be a saw wave. But yeah, something that's like got more of a peak and like less stuff. Well, I guess more stuff across the spectrum, but less stuff on the actual wave. So yeah, if you really want to go for like the growl sound, then probably you want to have the full spectrum, because then you've got more stuff to like shape, and you're not like competing against noise that you're pulling out with OTT. Yeah. Anyway, so basically what I suspect I did is I probably started by adding some post-processing. Probably this one. I'm gonna turn this master down so that I don't rupture everyone's eardrums. So yeah, probably did a little bit of post-processing so I could actually hear the growl properly before I went any further. I'm doing another auto filter here, like another bandpass, because I'm an idiot. You don't have to do this. You can you could probably just ignore that this is here, but I would take note of the fact that I'm using a little bit of drive here, probably just to add some distortion. So I'm doing that twice, like really subtly with like a bit of bias. I think I have a knob for this because I'm like mucking around with it later. But the idea here is just to add a little bit of noise and a little bit of like saturation to the sound, so that when I OTT it, it doesn't just pull straight noise out of it. It pulls like something that might be related to the actual waveform. It's obviously going to be quieter because it's not a bandpass, because I'm an idiot. I have this notch filter which is mapped to macro 1, which is the one that I'm using to do the actual growl with. So this bandpass filter, which also has distortion on apparently, is mapped to the same macro that's controlling this and the same macro that's controlling this. So this is doing like a good part of the shaping of the formats. So this comes up, this is distorting, and then this comes down. So you sort of make it sound more formanty. And then the whole thing is getting hard carried by the fact that there is this formant filter, just doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm also automating this formant amount, which like moves these peaks towards each other, sort of like how I've just done. It's just more of that. It's also mapped to the same like big growl macro. Scroll corpus, it looks like it's off. I don't believe it's off. I think this is a visual bug, because it should be on, to my understanding. Yeah, it should be on because it's above 64, it's above half, so it is on. If you haven't seen this before, this is just lifted from the like Scary Monsters Nice Sprites growl remake server. It's probably been passed around a lot. The idea is you just get like a pipe corpus at like a really low pitch, and then you have an LFO on, and so all it does, it doesn't really change the sound, it just adds a bunch of artifacting from like whatever weird filter business they've got going on to do the physical modeling. It just has like a heap of artifacts. So because we're going to be effectively slamming the shit out of the growl with a bunch of OTTs, having this here adds all the crunch to it. So this kind of adds that traditional like crunchy, like bro step growl timbre. Spectral gate, this is going to be, might sound slightly insane, but what this is doing is this is also mapped to the main growl macro. And effectively, when the filter is at 0, when the bandpass is at 0, instead of just like having the filter start higher up in the spectrum like a normal person, I've decided a better option is to have this do more spectral gating when the filter's at the floor, so the OTT can't pull out like a huge noise wall because there's actually like nothing there, because this spectral gate just removes all of it. And then when the filter comes back up again, like back up the spectrum, and you can actually hear stuff, the spectral gate drops back down. So really all this is doing is stopping the OTT from turning this into like a noise pit, or like just like a wall of noise when the what's it called, when the bandpass is at 0, or when like it's being really carved. The actual gate itself, if you're interested, is just NIH plug spectral compressor doing general spectral compressing, so like the threshold's really low here, as you can see. Yeah, really doing a bunch of downwards expansion. The reason why I'm doing it so heavily is because the purpose of this is that I run it, well, I invert the phases of it and then run it in parallel with like a normal dry signal. So everything that this compresses, everything that this doesn't compress gets removed or like interferes destructively via this phase inversion with the dry signal. So when I have it like doing a heap of compression like it is right now, what that is really doing is letting most of the sound through. But then if I were to go somewhere lower, now it's a little bit higher up, which means that we are doing more spectral gating. So this is just like trimming up the noise floor. Yeah, anyway, small aside. And then the rest of it is just me sort of beefing it up and making it more interesting. So I'm using reduced ambience here. I don't really know that much about what other people are using. I'm pretty sure they're using like RX reverb remover or something. I don't really, I've got no idea what I'm talking about. But what this does is it's like traditional downwards expansion, but without the spectral quality. So it doesn't have any weird spectral sound, and you still sort of get some noise to come through. In this instance, despite it being downwards expansion, it's actually like helping to create noise, because what happens is the noise that the OTT makes like pokes his head above like this threshold, and then you can hear it for a second, and then it gets quiet enough to get shoved back down. So the effect is that it rapidly like is audible and then isn't, or like it keeps getting up and then slam back down again, which sort of adds some texture to the sound. More OTT. I'll just show you in context so you can see what it's actually doing. This is without it. So now you can hear more of that screw corpus coming through, which is great, but it's a little bit overbearing. So this sort of tames it a little bit, but then keeps it sounding gritty. Yeah, downwards expansion and reduced ambience and biasing. Anything asymmetrical that adds like crunch is one of my favorite things ever. I'm using locked because I think it sounds awesome, and I wanted to make it sound sort of glitchy, and it does that, so that's fun. Yeah, it's just a dry rack, so I've got 2 chains, and then I'm like what's it called, crossfading them over this region, and then I've mapped like the chain selector to this standard Ableton funny business. Anyway, how do I hide this? Probably the button that says hide. Yeah, because I suck at doing sound design, my approach to growls is that I make something that sounds like a growl, and then when I want it to be in the lower registers, I just shift it there. Because for some reason I find it really painful to like make the formants in the low mids. There's something about it, it's just like really annoying. It might be have something to do with the fact that like the saturator or whatever is like more inclined to pick up the lower frequencies or something. I don't really know. But yeah, it's a crutch. So I'm just using Alexander Panos' Formant shifter to shove the whole thing down the spectrum. So now it sounds a little bit more growly. This is where some funny business begins. So, Avox through it. This is pretty cool. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but what I think it's doing is it's probably like re-synthesizing the input into a bunch of like a series of pulse waves, and then it models a Formant filter or a bunch of peaks on a Formant filter around those pulse waves. So effectively, it's like a dynamic Formant filter, but its function is to like attenuate the existing formants. So this is just a crutch. This just means I don't have to like spam a gazillion peak filters or whatever to make it sound like a growl. That has a purpose. It's because I think it's funny, and I wanted to make it sound even more glitchy and weird. So what this is doing, macro 1 is mapped to this peak filter 6, which turns on here. As you can see, it just jumps up the spectrum like 400, 600, 400, 600, but in like these quantized equal length steps. So this is like a standard tactic to do like glitchy sound design, and this is sort of like what a dimension what the fuck am I talking about? This is sort of what like a redux or downsampler does behind the scenes. Like it quantizes a particular volume range for a period of time. So I'm sort of using that idea to just snap this filter to specific harmonics in steps. It doesn't sound that interesting now, but with the post-processing, it like really sort of pops out, and it makes the mids more interesting than just like some filter movement. EQ, I don't know what this is doing. I'm going to pretend it's not there. OTT, and then more Formant shifter, because apparently I wasn't happy with how I was Formant shifting earlier. You probably shouldn't do more than one, because you just add like a bunch of unnecessary artifacting and like audio garbage. You could probably just get away with using one and automating it a bit better. But this is just shoving these higher notes, like the timbre of these higher notes, even lower. So it sounds like more consistent across the whole thing. And also because it was a little bit shouty early on, but the way that I wanted this growl to move was to sort of like be a growl and then be a weird shouty glitchy thing and then be a growl again. So I have it come in to shift everything down. So yeah, you can hear exactly what it's doing. It lets like the other harmonics poke their heads up. And then I've got another downwards expansion thing with some interesting levels. This is just shaping it. So it really like brings the mids out and makes them honk a bit. All pass phase, this is just like a diopser clone or disperser clone. You know what it does? It makes everything sound zappy and goopy. In fact, it doesn't even need to exist really. It probably is just destroying my phasers. These OTTs exist because I thought it wasn't bright enough before, so they're mapped to like a macro. So then later when I muck around with this growl, I turn them back on. More EQing. I'm going to pretend that I don't see that these are like almost cancelling each other out on either side of the OTT. I'm very smart and I know what I'm doing. More Avox through it because I suck at sound design, and it's a very convenient crutch. So that is added like a heap to it, and it's also picking up on the filter movement that I've done back here. So every single time like one of those peaks hits one of the regions that the Avox is like noticing is like a Formant region, it emphasizes it really briefly. So now it sort of sounds like there's like a weird vocal jumping all over the place, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So without the post, it sounds like that, which is pretty fun. The post-processing, I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier, this splitter thing doesn't need to exist. This was just earlier in the train when I was like, I would like this to have more noise. So all it does is it splits the mids and the lows from the highs, and then it's like Cohen sound style processing where you just like grill the highs and then you, what's it called? You high pass the whole thing, so it's just the noise that we're getting out of the distortion that we want. And then I was ring modding it, I believe, against the actual low band, so that it still has that like fluttery sound, like a volume automation or like amplitude modulation on like a high LFO or like oscillator. Saturation, because it's loud, it needs to be loud. Dubstep. OTT, because it needs to be loud. Spectral gate, because apparently the noise was too overbearing. And then this, just to contradict myself, these probably don't need to exist. That is just slamming the like shit out of the high end. So if there isn't any high end, this will make sure that there is high end by pulling out anything that's in this region into like full volume and then clipping it against this like heavy downwards expansion. Downwards compression. Or just normal compression, you could even say. And then I'm just cranking the output so that it's nice and bright, and then automating the amount so that like if it's too bright, you can chill out a little bit. And then I'm clipping it, dubstep, moment. I don't know what this limiter is doing. It probably doesn't need to exist. I don't know what this is doing either. Oh, okay. So this is just like last minute fix. So OTT, and then I'm high passing the sides. This should probably go after the OTT. But anyway, more high end slam, crispness. Pro Q, because I was too lazy to actually automate the multiband dynamics properly. So what this is doing is it just, if it goes like too loud, it's dynamic. It just tells it to be quiet and behave itself a little bit. These exist. They probably don't need to. I think the idea was my headphones have a peak at like 2K and like 3K. Sorry, my headphones have a notch at 2K, 3K. So I counteract that by adding a peak to my mix, which is bad because then everyone that doesn't have that have a peak at 3K. So that's probably what these are doing here. But I can't really explain to you. Everything that I make is like in a fugue state, apparently. And G-clip, because dubstep needs to be loud. And then a final EQ just to like ruin all of my hard work. Yeah. And then I'm layering that with a dedicated sub. I don't know why it sounds different to the beginning of the video. Black magic is afoot. I'd be interested to see what this sounds like if I just give it a saw. Yeah, so yeah, this sort of thing you can get all manner of funky sounds out of. Thanks for listening.